Good afternoon and welcome to the Saturday Forum. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful day. I'm honored to introduce two trailblazers in breaking glass ceilings, Maeley Tom and Dr. Barbara OConnor. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be available for viewing later on our YouTube channel. If you have a question, down at the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A. You can click on that, type in your question, and click send. We'll be collecting questions and they will be answered at the end of the presentation. As a reminder, the chat is disabled. So again, I'm honored to introduce Maeley Tom and Dr. Barbara OConnor. Maeley Tom spent 20 years of her professional career in the California Legislature, holding chief executive positions in both houses. During her tenure in the state capitol, she was recognized by the Sacramento Bee, the Sacramento Magazine, and California Journal as one of the most influential political figures in California legislature. She continued with a very successful career in private industry. Of note, she was appointed by President Reagan to serve on the Women's Business Ownership Commission and also appointed by President Clinton to represent the U.S. at the United Nations Women's World Conference Platform Committee in New York. She will share her amazing journey in an interview with Dr. Barbara OConnor this afternoon. This short intro does not do justice to all of her accomplishments. However, she is a very successful author and has written a book about her very interesting life. I'm Not Who You Think I Am, an Asian American Woman's Political Journey. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Barbara OConnor, Emeritus Professor of Communications and Director of the Institute for the Study of Politics and Media at CSUS. If she looks familiar, it's because she often appears in various media to discuss politics. I think during the Gray Davis recall, they must have had her on the local television 20 times a day. She has also served as an expert consultant to dozens of media conglomerates around the United States, as well as the California Legislature, the Federal Communications Commission, and the U.S. Congress. She was selected as Newsweek's 1995 50 for the Future. And what she told me is that she's most proud of having started Sacramento's thriving public radio station, CAP Radio, KXPR FM. So before we bring them on, we are going to test your knowledge by doing a poll. So if we can go ahead and start the poll, and we'll give you a couple minutes to answer this. There are 5 questions. Oh, Deborah, I think we have the sample poll up. So let's go ahead and shut that one down and bring up the one for for this forum. There we go. That looks a little bit more familiar. So question 1, what is the current Asian American population base in California? 9%, 11%, 16%. And if you haven't participated in a poll before, you should be able to just click on a line and that will put your answer in. I see there's about 86 of us out there that can vote. So number 2, when was the first Asian American elected to the California Legislature? Was it 1931, 51, 61, or 71? Oh, I see we have people starting to respond. Question number 3, how many Asian Pacific Islanders serve in the state legislature today? 5, 8, or 11? And number 4, who was the first Asian American appointed to a presidential cabinet position? Was it Senator Hiram Fong, Congressman Bob Matsui, Congressman Norm Mineta? Who was the first Asian American woman elected to Congress? Was it Judy Chu, Patsy Mink, or Tammy Ducksworth? And I see that we have about 36% of you that have completed the poll. Oh, we're really speeding up now. We are over 50%. So it's interesting to see the questions are all over. I'll be giving you the correct answers in in a few minutes. We'll allow about 20 more seconds. So if you're on the edge of an answer, pick one and hit your submit button down at the bottom of the poll. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you very much for responding. So for question 1, the correct answer was C, 16%. It looks like we had a tie on that one. And then on question 2, the correct answer was 1961. So 37% of you got that right. And question 3, the answer was number C, 11. And question 4, the answer, we did have the correct answer. Most of you, 57%, identified as it correctly. And finally, question number 5, it was Senator Tammy Duckworth. So you all did a great job of answering the questions, and I'm now happy to turn the rest of the forum over to these wonderful women.
Go ahead, Maeley.
Thank you. It's very interesting. I'm very impressed that so many of you really answered a lot of these questions correctly, because Asian Americans always continue to be somewhat of a mystery. We're always kind of the third group on the radar screen as to people really understanding or really knowing what's happening with Asian American politics. So I graduate. I mean, this is a keen audience. I'm not sure if the last question, Lori, did you say the correct answer was Tammy Duckworth or?
Oh, you are correct. It is actually, yes, you're right.
Yeah, Patsy May.
Mm-hmm.
But Tammy's making us real proud now. So I just want to thank the Renaissance Society for giving me the opportunity to have this discussion with you. I also thank the tech support group who've been so helpful in putting this on. And I'm just very excited to have this discussion and to share some of my experiences with all of you. And hopefully some of you will ask questions. We'll have enough time for some questions and answers. And I'm especially delighted that I have my dear friend, Barbara OConnor, who's going to be moderating this interview. So with that, Barbara, I'm gonna be in your hands.
Okay, and we are good friends, so yeah, I'll try to be harsh, but I'm not with Maeley. When I first commented on her, I didn't know her. And consequently, we've gotten to be very good friends, and we go buy jewelry together and do all kinds of stuff that is unrelated to politics, because both of us are retired. But we have 3 questions we would like you to listen to. And the first one is, why the title of this book, Maeley, and why did you decide you needed to write it? Because I went through it with you. And so what prompted the urge on your part?
This was really a 25-year project for me.
Right.
And the reason for the title first is the fact that I didn't grow up in a traditional Asian family. I had a very unusual type of youth. And I grew up pretty much on my own without any parents. I spent the first 8 years of my life, from the time I was 2 weeks to 8 years old, being raised in a foster home by a French Basque family. So this gave me the opportunity to grow up in a very Western culture that promoted a feeling of esteem and was warm, emotional, promoted self-expression, very non-traditional from an Asian environment. And then I found that my mother decided that she wanted me to learn how to be more Chinese. So she took me out of this 8-year warm, loving Western culture home and threw me into a Chinatown environment or different Asian environments to grow. And I found that I didn't want to talk too much about my background. So when I hit midlife, I realized that even though my family background was unusual, it really helped me succeed in my career. And so I wanted to share how this unusual childhood really helped me succeed. The second reason is that I chose the title because Asian women as a whole often face stereotypical barriers because, we always have to fight to prove that we have abilities beyond the Asian stereotypes that we face all the time. And we oftentimes have to say to people, I am not who you think I am. So those are the reasons why I chose the title, I Am Not Who You Think I Am, because of my own childhood that I kept pretty much secret and private, and also the fact that Asian women face this stereotypical image. The reason for the book and the reason why it really took me 25 years is that there's not very many books that discuss Asians in politics. In fact, if I ask some of you to name me who is the Martin Luther King or the Cesar Chavez of the Asian community, few of you will be able to answer that question because we have not yet surfaced that type of recognition of a hero in our community. I think the closest person to come to be recognized as an Asian leader is Norma Netta. And so being privileged to play a role in helping to expand the API political image during an era when they were invisible was one of the motivations why I wanted to write the book. I think secondly, I felt so blessed. I felt so blessed to, based on luck and timing, to have the opportunity to break the glass ceiling in the state capital, where Asians were so rare. And it was just a white male dominated society that people would ask me all the time, how did you do it as an Asian minority woman? How are you able to break that glass ceiling? And so I thought this book would give me the opportunity to share those thoughts. But politics is never a smooth road. And I faced my share of tough episodes. One of them was that the most devastating episode in my life occurred in 1997 when I served as the only non-elected Asian American on the executive committee of the Democratic National Committee that manages all Democratic politics in the country. And I was implicated as a part of the illegal Asian fundraising scandal that made national headlines for a year during the President Clinton administration. The issue really played a part in discouraging Asian American participation in politics. And no one has ever discussed the impact that it made to Asian Americans. And I myself wanted the chance to disclose how I survived by this guilt by association, racial profiling incident as a victim, because I was a victim of that. And as you can see, it hasn't changed much today. We see Asians still being scapegoated, still being targeted because we're still seen as foreigners. I want to share that experience. And finally, I was hoping that my political journey as an Asian woman, by tracing the evolution of Asians in politics during the 70s and onward, would really help inspire individuals of this generation that they too can make changes. It doesn't matter how you start out, because I will go through a little bit of my own childhood, how I started out, but it really depends how you end up. And I really believe that achieving is just simply believing in yourself. So I was hoping that the book would also serve as a way to inspire this generation to help their own community. And so, Barbara, that's the reason.
You did do that, and that was about when I got to know you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really an interesting time because I was down at the Capitol a lot and I had interns in every office, and so I was getting feedback that you were being scapegoated and that you really were a good human being, and so I believed them since I had taught them. And I really want to know how during that era and beyond, because you did do part of it after that era, but how did you break the glass ceiling twice as a minority woman? It's hard to do, so be honest.
I will. And I think that I bring up my unusual background that I kind of want to share with the audience, because I felt, and it took me really midlife to understand that the hardships I went through in pretty much raising myself after my 8 years in the foster home, being without parents, really gave me some tools and strength to survive a political career. As I mentioned, my parents were Chinese Cantonese opera performers, and they don't raise their kids. They just they farm us off into foster homes. And for me, I didn't even know I was Chinese. I mean, I was raised by French Basque people. I ate lamb, I ate cheese. I remember stomping on grapes to make wine with French Basque family. I had no idea who I was. Well, that bothered my mother. So after 8 years, my mother, who came back to visit me from time to time, decided it was time to throw me into some Chinese families so I would learn my own identification of being Chinese. But during that time, it was pretty hard because, you know, I went from different home environments. I didn't have any parental guidance. I was just shifted from different homes. And so I learned to grow up independently. By the time I was 16, I graduated from high school. I was unusually smart, I have to say, for my age. And the Western culture that I grew up in really taught me to be proud of the fact that I'm smart, and it's okay to say you're smart. Whereas if I grew up in an Asian family, you never talk about it and you always downplay it. But I had this kind of Western culture in me that I was smart. It helped me gain a lot of attention, Barbara. It created a drive in me to be a super achiever, because the attention really validated my self-worth of how I could gain attention through being smart. So I graduated from high school at the age of 16, and I was completely on my own then financially, and I had to find a way to support myself through college. I did. I graduated from San Francisco State University, yes, part of the CSUC, and I received my BA degree in social welfare. And I have to say that being able to do this on my own gave me a certain air of confidence that I could face any challenge that came before me. So these were some of the basics that helped me survive a political career. The fact that I developed social skills at an early age, because it was so important for me to fit in with peer groups and neighborhoods, and my school, because they were my surrogate family, and the survival skills that I learned, understanding that social skills and being driven to succeed really played a role in me succeeding in the Capitol. I started in the Capitol actually as a legislative assistant to the Majority Whip, Joseph Montoya, because he represented a very Asian district. And it just so happened that I lived next to a lobbyist who knew the Majority Whip, who was looking for an Asian woman. He told me about it, and that's when I first discovered in the Capitol, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I think to this day, it's still that way. It's a who you know environment to get a job there. And the fact that he wanted an Asian professional because he represented Monterey Park, I was just hired immediately, having no political experience. But I knew right away as a minority woman that I wanted to define myself in a proactive way by finding ways and means to make a difference, and not only in performing my daily responsibilities, but to find a void to make a difference, because I knew how tough it was to compete in a Capitol environment where it's the survival of the fittest. There's no civil service safety net. You either are going to succeed or you're going to be out. And it could happen within 24 hours. So it's a very competitive environment. But thank God for my early upbringing, I had those skills. And I took advantage of the fact in trying to make a difference that I found that Asians were invisible during that time. They were seen as a very mysterious constituency. And I decided, being an Asian, I wanted to change that dynamic. So I went out and I became very active in the Asian community and helped them have a voice, not only in the Capitol, but also have the Capitol respect the Asian constituency as a constituency that had issues just like everybody else. And so my ability to fill that void in the institution showed also my leadership capabilities. So I killed two birds with one stone, trying to make a difference and showing my leadership skills. I think that the fact that I was so driven, Barbara, to be a super achiever, to gain the attention, to kind of validate my own self-worth, that I was constantly evaluating my strengths and my weaknesses. And I knew my strengths were people skills, communication skills, and I was a quick learner. But I was also quick to let people know what I did not know. And I never hesitated to ask the right people for help. And in the Capitol, sometimes that's a rare quality, because in the Capitol, you want to showcase how smart you are all the time. I studied the dynamics and the culture and the attitudes of the Capitol with great depth. And I built relationships vertically, horizontally with all the players. Inside and outside the Capitol, things that I had to do growing up because I needed friends, because they were my surrogate family. So I used these same skills in the Capitol to try to belong, try to be accepted, even though I was a rare minority Asian woman face. I volunteered for campaigns. I participated in extracurricular activities so that I was fully integrated into the power structure of the Capitol network, so that I was just not seen as an Asian American woman. I was seen as just part of the structure. I always valued networking, and I gained invaluable mentors on the way, mentors like the former Senator Art Torres. At that time, there were several Black Caucus, strong Black Caucus women like Maxine Waters, who took me under her wings because she wanted to see minority women succeed in the Capitol. And she also knew the barriers that specifically Asian women were challenged with in the Capitol. And I had this great mentor, the late John Vasconcellos, who believed in diversity, that he also wanted me to succeed. So I was very fortunate. But you know, there's no straight road in riding up the career ladder in any profession, but especially in politics.
That's right.
And I faced some of those challenges, and I have two stories I want to share that shows how I had to meet some really barriers to succeed in the positions that I eventually was able to be appointed to. When the second most powerful administrative position opened up in the Capitol, it was the Deputy Administrative Officer position that was the personnel director for the Assembly. And I came to the Assembly with a personnel background. And at that time, affirmative action really helped me because the speaker at that time was Leo McCarthy. And he was a great believer in diversity and wanted to diversify the state capitol to more clearly reflect the demographics of the state of California. So he was on a rampage to select more diverse professionals to work in the state capitol. And of course, the personnel position, he was definitely looking for an ethnic minority to serve as personnel officer. I was the only ethnic minority, and I was a woman who had personnel experience. But my barrier was that the Black Caucus, the very powerful Black Caucus, had their own candidate for the position who didn't have the experience, but he had the influence and the power of the Black Caucus behind him. So when I went into my first interview for this Deputy Administrative Officer job, the rules chair, who was Lou Pappin, was very close to the Black Caucus. And I was told, Maeley, good luck, but it's going to go to the Black Caucus candidate, because that's how it is in politics. It's not based on merit. It's based on influence and power and relationships. So I went in for my interview with this very dynamic rules chair who barely wanted to give me eye contact and was just doing as a routine. And he asked me why I wanted the job. I told him I was qualified. I had this personnel experience. I had legislative experience. He asked me, what did my husband do for a living? I didn't know what that had to do with the interview, but I said my husband was a pharmacist. And his response to me was, if your husband is a pharmacist, why are you not working in the cosmetic counter? Pharmacy. I was so blown away by this response. And instead of sticking up for myself as a woman, or to really, say this is not a fair question or whatever, I was totally so flabbergasted that my response to him was, my husband doesn't own his pharmacy. He works for a chain pharmacy. That was my answer, my wonderful answer. And I was so shaken by that interview. I don't even remember how the interview ended because I wanted to get out of that office so fast.
Yeah.
So it was lucky for me that there was this amazing Speaker of the Assembly, Leo McCarthy, who the Chief Administrative Officer went to and said, we have a qualified Asian woman who can do this job. And I need you to tell the Black Caucus that we should go with this woman who really has the qualifications. And thank heavens, Leo McCarthy, with his integrity, and even knowing that he may alienate the Black politicians' votes for him for Speaker, stood by the request and appointed me to the second, senior administrative position in the Capitol. So, moving right along, I was Deputy Administrative Officer of the Capitol for 7 years. Mm-hmm. And I was able to establish a reputable reputation as an administrator, as a personnel director. And I did so well that when there was a turnover of the Chief Administrative Officer positions, that I was asked to train the next Chief Administrative Officer to be my boss. There were 3 males that I trained to be my boss. And at the end of 7th year, when a 4th CAO was going to come on, because they turn them over pretty quickly, yeah. It's the highest paid position in the Capitol. And it's typical, it's like a CEO of a company. That's what the CAO is to the Assembly. So it's very powerful. I started to feel if I could train 3 CAOs to be my boss, I don't know why I'm not getting the job, I mean, this wonderful, obedient female deputy is always going to be around to train. So I did ask the rules chair, who by this time was one of my staunchest supporters. He saw how I was able to manage my position and able to really do a pretty good job managing the personnel program for the Assembly. So he told me the choice is not mine, Maeley, for you to get the CAO job. The choice belongs to the Speaker. And the Speaker at this time was Willie Brown, yeah. Who not very many people challenge. But I decided it was my turn. And I told my husband the morning that I was going to go for this CAO position and have this meeting with Willie Brown, I said, I'm either going to come home unemployed or I'm going to come home with the top CAO job of the Assembly. So I went in to see Willie Brown, and his manner of managing is that if you work for him as an executive, he gives you 60 seconds to tell him the problem. And then he gives you 60 seconds to give him the solutions. And when I told him I was the problem, and if I was able to train 3 CAOs to be my bosses, I surely was able to take the job as a CAO. And after 60 seconds, of the longest 60 seconds of my life, he said to me, what took you so long? And so it was a lesson learned. And so subsequently, I became the CAO, which is like the CEO of a company, managing the budget, staff, personnel, members, all their businesses, and also handling the bill referrals so that you refer bills to the right committee for passage. And that was very major responsibility of being the CAO, and it was also the highest paying position of the assembly at that time. But I think what helped me probably succeed in my position was the fact that my drive to over succeed a lot of the times really gained me a reputation of being an effective problem solver. I think my ability to cultivate relationships with members, both Republicans and Democrats, helped me build a trust among the membership. And I felt that my resilience, because of the many times I was challenged, the many times that I was tested as a woman, as a minority, whether or not I could, handle some of the responsibilities or challenge because they didn't like decisions I made. I think that I discovered that I had the capability of dealing with those issues and yet still not create a lot of enemies, which is a skill, I must say. But as they say, Barbara, it's not how fast you run or how high you jump, it's how you bounce. And I think that was probably the key to one of my traits that helped me survive being a CAO of the assembly. I was able to, because of my reputation in the Capitol, serving as the CAO, it was not a hard decision for Senator Roberti subsequently to ask me to come to the Senate to serve as his chief of staff. And I used some of those same skills to work for an amazing president of the Senate and helped him to run the Senate. And subsequently, that's how I was able to break the glass ceilings.
Well, and those of us who observed you, you're being very shy again. You are ethical and you have a strong moral compass. And that is something that is not always the case in the Capitol. So you're known rightfully as the godmother of Asian American politics in California. Why? And I've answered it for you if you want to take the short answer, since we're running a little over time. And what did you do when you had power? I observed you. We got to be friends about that time. Vasconcellos was a good friend. Leo McCarthy was a good friend. And you asked me, I'll never forget this. You asked me if I do training at Sac State for all of your Asian peeps. And I said, sure. And so I did that for about 10 years. And then you asked me, you and Georgetta Muro, who we just lost and was quite special. You asked me to serve on the board of the API caucus, the Institute. And so why did I say yes? I mean, why are you the godmother of this group? Because you really are.
Yeah.
You really are.
It's luck and timing, because when I started in the legislature, we were invisible. And as a staffer, I just wanted to make a difference and create political awareness for my community, because I felt so fortunate, me and Georgette and some other Asian staffers, how exciting it was to be in the seat of power, and yet how demoralizing it was where no one talked about Asian Americans.
No, I agree with
And so I used, that time to encourage. We developed workshops. We educated Asian American communities how to engage in politics. We showed, Asian candidates how to run for office, because we were there at the seat of power, being able to educate them and encourage them and to help them understand that Asians have to be visible before we have a voice.
Well, and I think you did that very well. I mean, you really did.
Yeah.
And so for me to say yes with an already busy life is indicative of that, because all of my friends loved you. And they didn't love you just because you were a fluffhead. They loved you because you were terrific.
Well,
and so I started out as a fan.
Yeah, what I was able to do is to break some glass barriers in democratic politics, as you know, as an Asian. For example, two of what I'm most proud of is that I put together two conferences that became historic for Asian Americans. One was a California conference where I told the Koreans, the Japanese, and the Chinese, and the Filipinos all to speak with one voice. Right. And by speaking with one voice, we were more powerful, and we were able to get gubernatorial candidates to address Asian issues for the first time in history in California.
You did.
And it caught the attention of the Democratic National Committee, where they asked me to duplicate that effort. So I was able then to work, this is when Dukakis ran, to put together the first historic presidential conference, Democrat presidential conference, where, get this, presidential candidates actually addressed Asian issues for the first time in a public forum in history, because it usually was blacks and browns. And then
you really did always have that kind of bigger view.
Yes,
It
yes.
was API, Asian Pacific Islanders, which
Exactly.
is a broad swath.
And then
Yeah,
I realized how important it was for Asian Americans to become more visible in political campaigns. And so what I did was I became very involved with campaigns. I was the first deputy director of a presidential campaign, and that was with Michael Dukakis. Unfortunately, we lost. But I became an advisor to the Clinton-Gore campaign, the Gore-Lieberman campaign, got Asians involved with grassroots campaigns. And the fact that Asians were now becoming more involved with campaigns and with the political process, they found that it paid off, because during the Clinton administration and during the Obama administration, more Asian Americans were appointed to cabinet and to executive positions than ever before. I know, quite frankly, I have to give Bush credit too. As he was seeing more Asians getting involved, he started recruiting Asians and was really becoming much more proactive in being inclusive in getting Asians into the scene. And so having these opportunities to encourage and to serve as a role model to Asians in politics probably was the reason why they started calling me godmother, because
there was more than that, but
I started some organizations. You're on the board of one, and that's the Joint Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus Institute, which has the Capital Academy, which trains Asians, local Asian elected officials to become state legislators. And today, 50% of our Asian legislators are indeed graduates of the Capital Academy.
And some were statewide officers are as well. So
exactly. And I think, the greatest joy that I have was having the opportunities. One, I was a political columnist for 8 years for Asian Week. I produced a show called Facets in Channel 40 about Asian issues. And so eventually, you expand your network so that you have influence everywhere, And so people would come to you, and the power that you have and the influence is really to share with those. It's not enough that we succeed. It's more important that we look back to help others succeed. And, Barbara, you always ask me, what are you most proud of in your career, and my feeling that when I see people like Ted Lieu, Mark Takano, who I've had the chance to help mentor, John Chung, who ran for governor, Betty Yee, Fiona Ma, and people who are now serving in the White House. And I kind of call them like my kids.
They are.
Yeah, that's just the greatest pleasure. It's not the fancy titles, because I think luck and timing has to do with that, but it's being able to give back, as people have given back to me when I was growing up on my own. And I think, so I have to say that my greatest reward and my greatest achievement in my career and in my life is the beauty of being able to mentor. And I think to many of those in this listening, I'm sure you all agree with me, because I know a lot of you have the same philosophy, and that is, when you receive, you share, and when you learn, you teach. And that kind of epitomizes where I am today. I'm very lucky.
Well, you're more than lucky. You're talented, you're smart, you're ethical, and everyone would say that about you. It's not just me. And they've replicated it with the League of California Cities. Now each has their own API caucus. it's really fun to see it for me
Yes.
too, because I lived it too and had little to do with it. I commented on it.
Yes.
And I know there are a lot of questions and we're about 4 minutes over. So
Okay.
I will take my video off and my mic off and you will answer.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank
Welcome, sweetie. Anytime.
Thank you so much, Barbara. This is Christy Brazil. I'm helping out with some of the questions and answers today, Maeley. Oh my gosh, you are and clearly have been a force to be reckoned with, girl. I am honored to know you. I want to ask you a quick question. What has been your experience with the COVID-19 scapegoating of Asians this last year? Because we've heard the dreadful stories in the news, but I'm sure you have some person experience.
It's very timely because, you know, it's happening right now. An issue that we're dealing with is occurring in Woodland in Yolo County, where elders are being beaten up and just being assaulted. I mean, just really close to home. And I just have finished working with the API Legislative Caucus, and they have just put out a press release that they're going to work with the Department of Justice and to tighten up some of the penalties for what's happening with the Asian community. There's, you know, not only is it related to COVID, Christy, but I have found in my 40 years working with Asian politics, Asians seem to be the easiest ethnic minority to pick on. One, we have a language problem because 70% of our Asians are immigrants. Two, they fear going to the authority. Three, they don't fight back. And we're easy pickings. But when the COVID started, I mean, it just escalated the victimization of Asian Americans who are always seen as foreigners. And it tripled the threat against our community. And it seems like, you know, we don't have that force of the Black Lives Matter. But I think, Christy, this latest episode where the assaults have escalated to 2,500 incidences as of today, all around the country. We want to not only fight for ourselves, and I think this younger generation is far more confident to fight and stand together because they all participated with the Black Lives Matter. We need to form coalitions. We can't do it by ourselves. I feel, you know, if we form coalitions and we have helped to fight anti-Semitism, Asians have helped to fight the LGBTQ rights issues. We are now looking for these coalitions to help us. But Asians hate to ask. But it's time that we learn to ask. It's time that we learn to stand up for ourselves, not be silent, and live according to the principles of our Western society, that we have to be the squeaky wheel. And that's something that's very tough for the Asian culture to learn, because it's simply not within our Asian culture to complain or to make waves. But this latest incidence that's rising, like I said, 2,500, I think hopefully it's the tipping point for our community.
How do you personally cope with it emotionally?
It's very tough, but the way I cope with it too is that, just like I'm working with the Yolo County and the Woodlands, is just to tell them they have to fight. You know, I can't tell you how tough it is to get our community to fight, but I have faith that the younger generation will. It breaks my heart because I will talk to some of these families and they don't want to say anything. They don't want to create trouble and they're scared of reprisals. So it's like I said, you know, Christy, this goes back to, I said, I grew up in a different environment. I grew up with the French Basque. And so I have some of those traits.
Yeah, good for you. Continue the activism. We have a question from one of our members. How would you describe the makeup and difference of today's legislature with the one you first experienced at the beginning of your career?
That's, excuse me, that's an excellent question. The reason why I have a 20-year tenure in the legislature is because there was no term limits. So a lot of the legislators were like career legislators, which really in some way establish a continuity in terms of how we pass bills. And we had experts. Legislators became policy experts. And because there was no term limits, relationships between the Republicans and Democrats, quite frankly, were a lot more cordial. And it wasn't so disenfranchised. For example, I would see a Republican and a Democrat fight on the floor. Next thing I know, they're playing poker at Frank Fats. You know, they're meeting each other. They had that type of camaraderie. When term limits came in, that completely changed. The expertise and the policy expertise no longer was with the legislature. Actually, it was with the powerful third house. So there was a learning curve in the legislature, and the turnover created to me a lack of expertise in the legislature that we used to have, and a lack of ongoing relationships with constituencies that we used to have when I was there, because we didn't have term limits. Now you see the legislature going back to the times where I was there, because the term limits are longer. And it's actually healthier for the legislature, because you have a deeper understanding of policy issues, and you have a deeper expertise in the legislature to try to resolve our issues today. Whereas when there was a constant turnover, I felt it was somewhat chaotic, where every legislator who was coming in was looking what type of job they're going to get when they get out. And it just wasn't as stable, but it's stabilizing now. So that's a great question.
Great, thank you. Next question is, why don't you run for office?
A lot of people ask me that question. The reason why I didn't run for office is because I didn't have the courage to have to ask people for money. And I didn't have the courage that a lot of our Asians have to face, of taking the risk to publicly run for office and lose. And that's what holds back a lot of Asians from running for office. And the fact that I suffered from those same weaknesses is the very reason why I tell these young Asian leaders who are coming up to not be like me. I did have a third reason, though, I have to say, is that my husband, who's somewhat traditional, did not want me to run for office. He also did not want me to go to the White House to work under the Clinton administration. So in spite of the fact that I portray this very independent woman, I made some choices that I didn't want to sacrifice a good man who I've been married to for 52 years, so obviously made the good choice. But I also had weaknesses too. I wasn't perfect, and I suffered from the same weaknesses that I try to now have people overcome. When John Chung decided to run for governor, I can't tell you how many people said, "Don't do it, John, it's going to be tough," and this and that. You know what? I was so proud of him when he said, "I want to run, because if I don't run and risk, and even if I lose, how can I mobilize and motivate people, other Asians, to run?" And I so admire his courage, because I didn't have that courage myself, although I have to blame a little bit on my husband too, who's sitting right here. So I have a traditional Asian husband too.
Well, I admire your willingness to be so honest in your answer. I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like you're doing some great activism behind the scenes, and you can be just as effective, probably. Too bad money is so important.
Yes.
Being elected to office.
Yes.
Someone wants to ask if you could suggest some strategies to increase voter turnout for all the minority groups, not just Asian Americans.
That's an excellent question too, because I think the greatest hindrance of getting more minorities to vote, especially our new fresh immigrants, first of all, we got to get them to register to vote, is the language barriers and the investment of language material, of classes, language classes to help them understand why it's so important to participate in the electoral process. I happen to, I have this part-time consultant position with this organization some of you may have heard of. It's called APAPA, Asian Pacific and Pacific Affairs. It's locally headquartered, and it really is tailor-made to help the new immigrants feel comfortable to participate in the electoral process. What happens with Asians is that if they don't speak English well, they're embarrassed. So they don't want to participate, they don't get involved because they're just embarrassed with their accent. And we have to help them overcome that by using people who have bilingual skills to motivate them and to help them to understand why it's important for them to vote and to use issues that resonate with them, such as education for students, healthcare resources for the Asian Americans to understand, small business at the heart of things, to help them understand the reason why they don't get their share of resources is because they don't vote. And so it's being able to connect the two. One of the proudest accomplishments of the Asian vote was in Georgia, where we knew we had a number of new voters in Georgia, Asian voters, to register who could make the difference between, I'm sorry if there's Republicans in this audience, but to help Democrats win the 2 Senate seats. They use exactly the method that I'm talking about. They use the ethnic bilingual people to get the Asian minorities to vote. They used people who spoke Chinese or Korean or Vietnamese to drive these voters to the polls. They spoke their language, and it's all in communicating in the language. Remember, about 70% of our Asian population are new immigrants. So I'm kind of in the minority because I'm an Asian-born American.
You know what? It just occurred to me, Maeley. I have a question. I'm on the board of directors for the Renaissance Society, and one of our most major watchwords and mantras these days is to diversify the Renaissance Society with more people of diverse backgrounds. How could we reach out to the Asian American community to invite more of, and it doesn't have to be necessarily people that are retired. We're looking for anyone 50 years older. More of the Asian American community to join us and be part of what we have to offer here?
I think a lot of people don't know about the Renaissance Society in the Asian community because I had to Google it. And Tom was wonderful in educating me about it. But I think,
what's the best resource then that we could go to that we could get the word out?
I think there's a lot of Asian organizations like APAPA, OCA, JACL, just to advertise the wonderful seminars. I looked at some of your forums that are so interesting. I also think that a natural group to help you reach out more to Asian community is the academic professors.
Great idea. Okay.
I mean, because there's so many Asian Americans who are professors, especially around this area. Like I work with Tim Fong, for example.
Good tip. We might be coming back to you for some more ideas. Thanks.
And then I remember one of my dearest friends was Carol Hayashino, who I don't know if you know Carol. I think she was in capital development for Sac State. And she was able to bring in more Asians to get involved with Sac State activities.
Great. We would love to have more folks involved with us. We got one last question that's come in and about 3 minutes to answer it. Do you have any humorous stories from your time in the legislature?
Oh, a lot of them. One campaign story, when you're an Asian staffer, they send you out to campaigns, and they send you out to the most derelict neighborhoods because they don't want to send out the everyday volunteers into these ghetto neighborhoods. So if you're a staffer, you have to go out into these neighborhoods. And one time, me and my best friend Georgette Mura were in San Bernardino, and they gave us like, they said, you know, you're in gangland territory here. So they gave us a whistle. Get this, a whistle to blow in case someone wants to rape us. I'm not kidding you. They said, if you're going to get gang, you know, you got this whistle. Nobody's around for the whistle. But we were carrying it, and we were walking down this highway, and these trucks were honking at us. And we didn't know what the world was. And we kept on walking, trying to, you know, with our little clipboard. And finally, we went to one area where my sidekick said, and we're both like, I'm 5'2" and she's like 4'7". She said, Maeley, there's 9 kids walking behind us with baseball bats with their caps turned backwards. And she says, I'm telling you now, it's not a baseball team. So now we're hiding in the brushes in the church to avoid this baseball team. Get on the streets again. Now we're scared. We sit in a cafe, you know, we decide just to go to a coffee cafe and get picked up by our campaign person. And what this waitress said, we told her what was happening. She says, you know, this is Hooker Row. And she says, you and your friend are fresh meat on this campaign path. So we have a number of those. I'll give you a last quick story. I told you that I participate in extracurricular activities. One of the things I did was I produced the end of the session bash for Willie Brown, where I got Asian legislators to perform on stage, and people would pay to come see them perform. The show became so big, it was at Arco Arena. And one of the acts was the chorus line, where I had legislators dance to one, you know, that one singular
sensation.
Okay, so Willie Brown doesn't have rhythm. I have to tell you, everybody thinks he doesn't have rhythm. So trying to get him on the beat. But then what happened was Maxine Waters came out and she twirled and landed on her butt in the middle of cameras and got off. And you know, me trying to be Miss Pollyanna, everybody's clapping. They thought it was great. They kind of thought it was part of the show. I go back to her, trying to be my Pollyanna. I said, Maxine, that was great. And she says, yeah, I fell on my ass. I said, oh, no, I don't think anybody noticed. She said, Maeley, that's the worst. That's the worst lie you've ever said. And so, you know, we have our fun times.
Yeah, well, that puts a wrap on it. You have been awesome. Thank you so very much. I'm sure everyone here enjoyed your insights and ideas, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Renaissance Society. Tom, thank you so much. Deborah and Lori and everybody, thank you so much.
Lori, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much. That was just a wonderful presentation. And we're going to get the slides up again, and it's going to show the book that you've written. And I have to tell you, I did purchase a book about a week ago from Amazon, and I am really enjoying it. And so, and the very last couple examples were a great way to end this on a humorous note. So we really appreciate both you and Barbara for your time, and also for the Renaissance members who moved from this being on a Friday to it being on a Saturday. So we appreciate you also making that. So I'm going to go ahead and let's move on to the next slide. So we want to let everyone know that today's presentation was recorded and will be available for viewing later on the Renaissance Society Forum channel on YouTube. And oops, I think we went a little fast through those. Okay, we want to let everybody know that next Friday's forum, we have another excellent forum. It's Dr. Juan Carlos Ruiz Godardo, and he's going to talk about Mexican culture in the context of the complex USA-Mexico relationship. And I did want to also remind people that this is the time of the month during the Renaissance that we asked folks to contribute to the food pantry. So you can find information about the food pantry in the Renaissance links. And we certainly appreciate all of you attending today. And we hope that you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.